Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back.
I just remember this epiphany one day. I'm driving up over the ridge of the second hole, sun's rising. So you can see there's the morning crew mowing the greens, the hole changer, there's our bunker crew, and the wave of the fairway mowers is coming through. And I'm like having this coffee, kind of watching this all happen. I'm like, I think this is it. And I that day I went back and I talked to the superintendent. I said, what do I need to do to get into this industry? And he's like, you got to go to school.
Here we are again with another episode of Turf Today, presented by Toro. Count on it. My name is Adam Kershane, and I'm joined by Brian Lorentz. This episode is being recorded on the Superintendent Network. And today, episode number 74, we are bringing you Cam Shaw, who is the manager of the Diploma in Turfgrass Management program over at the University of Guelph, which is in Ontario, Canada. Cam brings a lot to the show, a lot of great energy, and some stories that you will probably be retelling. We appreciate all the love lately, everybody. It's been nice hearing everybody reaching out. A lot of positive comments, a lot of positive feedback. We are excited for what's to come in 2025 as we build, as we are working with some of our sponsors. There's some fun stuff coming for you guys, so we're extremely excited about that. A couple of ways you guys can support the show. We have some merchandise on sale at the Superintendent Network store and the Turf Today shop. So check out both those websites to be able to find all that stuff. It's also accessible through Instagram. Thank you to everybody for the well wishes. The arrival of our new baby girl was very exciting, and we're very happy, very, very fortunate. Everybody's healthy and doing well. Everybody reaching out was very special, and we do appreciate that. So without further ado, I'll pass things down to Brian to see how he is doing.
How you doing?
Things are good. Been a busy week.
Congratulations.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah. She's a big sleeper, so we're getting more rest than we definitely did with our first. Although now he's a little busier. So it's like he's always the issue, even though he's been great. It's been really special having the two of them and get to see both sides of it and live both lives. So I'm really looking forward to it. My wife and I, we've always been boy parents. We have our dog's a boy and we've got a little boy, so it's always been about the boys and stuff. To have this little girl in our house, it's felt so kind of foreign and so different.
Sure.
But she's been so sweet and kind of stolen our hearts. So we're very happy.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So happy for you guys. Have you seen any jealousy or anything with Will yet?
No, not really. Like he's very happy. He's always asking, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And she's a log lady. Like she sleeps quite a bit. So, getting her with her eyes open, actually looking at you is something we haven't really done too much. So I think over the the coming few weeks we'll get to experience that a little more.
That's awesome, dude. So cool. And you said she's sleeping well, huh?
Yeah, it's been a blessing. She likes to be held when she sleeps, so that's been a big thing. So we're a lot of upright naps and things like that. But she's she's been letting us get rest, and my wife's been battling through too. She's been a bit of a warrior through this whole process, and
yeah, that's right. No, she's healthy otherwise, right? So everyone's a-okay and all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah, that's the important thing.
Good, absolutely.
Look at this. So Brian, another Canadian guest.
I know.
We keep going back and forth and getting you like that. Cam, how's it going, man?
Ahoy, hoy. How are you guys?
Great.
Not too bad. How you doing?
I'm good. We had a long morning class today. Wednesday mornings are always long. It's our internship presentation class. So students get a chance to talk about all their presentations. So it goes for about 3 hours.
Oh, boy.
And there's no way I could hold their attention that long. So it's really great for the students to get up there. And anyways, when it was done, I had to hammer off some emails and I was like, oh man, I got to get lunch.
Have you and Brian met in all your travels and through the turf world? You guys ever met?
We have not. No.
Pleasure to meet you on here.
Yeah, I'll have to make an effort to find you at the show this coming winter when I come down with our students. It'd be nice to shake your hand and meet you in person.
No, absolutely. We won't be hard to find. That's for sure. We'll be out and about at the show. So look forward to meeting you in person there. And how many students do you think you're going to be bringing along?
We'll probably have between 8 and 12.
Oh,
Usually
cool.
when we go down to the GCSAA show, the student participation there is directly associated with Turf Bowl, as you could imagine.
Right.
Yep.
So whatever number is usually a factor of four, because the teams are four. And so, yeah, it depends on interest. Some students are maybe a little intimidated by the concept of a intercollegiate turf competition. Others, they're just not interested in that. They rather, just focus on their studies, which is good. And then, other students just are suckers for punishment. And, as you can imagine, it's gotten quite competitive over the years. So the amount of prep and study beyond, what they're already doing in the program is above and beyond. And it can result in burnout, but if you manage your time properly, it's pretty rewarding. And the chunk of learning that happens preparing for Turf Bowl is like, it's a force to be reckoned with. It should almost be its own credit.
Last show I was at, I couldn't believe how many schools were involved, like how many programs had teams and were competing. And Brian, I don't know if that's something we've talked about on the show too much. Cam, would you mind spending a couple minutes and just talking about what the Turf Bowl actually is and how people can compete in that?
Yeah, and before I talk about it, the person that you should bring on to talk about it is probably Diana Kern,
Okay.
who sort of, at least that's the direct contact person that most of the schools hear from in terms of organizing and submitting teams. She's been overseeing it for a long time. There's about 5 or 6 people that kind of have been overseeing it. So that's who you should go to if you want a really great
She's
subject
the
on
pro,
Turf
eh?
Bowl. But
She's the
I mean, it's
best.
evolved tremendously over the years. Last year they actually did a little ceremony kind of recognizing how much it's grown. And so, when it started, again, don't quote me, that's where the experts would come in, but it started sometime in the early 90s, and it was like, maybe 7 students, and you were a team of one, I think, if I
Oh,
can recall correctly. So it was, and the content wasn't nearly as big, and the format was a little different. But it's gained popularity and momentum. And then, John Deere came in with a massive sponsorship to keep it going, which is awesome. And then the GCSAA's commitment to it. And it's now just become a very big public spectacle. And so all the students want to be, the top students want to be a part of it because it helps get their name out there. It kind of lets them measure their worth against some other schools. And, I am always quick to tell people, just because you didn't get first or 10th or 20th, like, it's just a tremendous privilege to be there. But so what happens is, Diana every year will send out a study packet. And on that study packet, there's a list of, I think it's 85 weeds, cool season and warm season, common name, Latin names. The students are expected to be able to identify every one of those weeds. And in theory, because the Latin names are on there too, anything on the study content pack is testable. So, you only have to know the common name, but you got to know the Latin binomial nomenclature too. There's diseases, of course, cool and warm season. There's basically all the expected turfgrass species that you'd be expected to know. Students need to know the anatomical features and identification keys for those. So we said weeds, diseases, insects, turfgrass, and what else am I missing here? The packet's so big, I've got it around here somewhere. Anyways, it's a sizable amount of material. And for our students, we only really teach cool season stuff here. We might get a little bit into warm season, and we'll create discussions around it if a student, let's say, goes down to work in the southern parts of the U.S. or another part of the world. But we pretty much try to focus mostly on cool season because that's where most of our students will go, and we have a limited amount of time. So, and it's pretty in depth. Like I always say to the students, like most people attending that conference, you know, Class A superintendents of 30 years would probably write that test, and they might get maybe 50% on it.
yeah,
And
exactly.
50% would be like a pretty good achievement. So yeah, it's awesome. And it used to be that you'd have, some multiple choice. You need to know math calculations. They'd give you, a rate of a product that needs to go out and an area, and you'd have to tell them how many tanks needed to go out if you were spraying at, this rate. And so the students have to do some math, and that would be multiple choice. There might be questions about active ingredients to use on diseases, and our students are somewhat at a disadvantage there because we just have so far less products here in Canada than
True.
what you'd
That's right.
you'd see in the US. So there's a lot of extra work there for them to go and learn about other active ingredients that are regulated in countries that aren't in Canada, or products that aren't in Canada. So then the diseases and the insects are picture-based identification. So the students will have a rotation station. It used to be stations, and they'd go up, and you'd have a limited amount of time to go through each of the different samples that were up there. You had to say what it was, and then you'd rotate onto the next station. That would be turfgrass ID. And so of the 28 species or 20 species you need to know, you have to be able to identify them. And then you go to the next station, and it used to be there would be sort of like a piece of equipment up there. So in the study pack, you get a diagnostic or a schematic of some piece of equipment. It could be a reel mower, it could be a sprinkler, and so that piece of equipment will be up there, sort of disassembled with all the components with numbers on them, and the students would have to say what each component was. Bottom foot valve, rock screen, nozzle, selector valve, solenoid, all that stuff. And then there was a case study, and the case study used to be like half of the final mark. And it was cool because it would be a very specific principle, and it would challenge the students to have to apply their knowledge. So it wasn't just about memorization. It was really testing your ability of how well you understood the content and how well you could apply that. So that was really cool, and we pulled that away because I think it was a beast to mark. It was really challenging.
It would
to
take a while.
Well, and there's subjectivity. One judge might read it and be like, that was decent. Another judge might be like, that was the greatest thing I've ever read. And then, so there was some issues with, I think, grading curves, and more than anything, I think it was just like a time constraint to have to go through these lengthy essays. They were like 1,500 word essays or something. So they took the case study out, and now it's all done on an iPad.
Naturally.
And it's great, actually. It's convenient. You can see the students kind of all huddling over their one iPad, and they go through the questions, one by one, and it's pretty cool, man. It's an awesome experience. I did it when I was a student in the program. I really encourage students that, if you got to be prepared, you got to be willing to put the work in. But the experience and the benefit is just tremendous. So, not to mention the conference itself. Like we haven't even talked about the experience of the conference. That's a whole other beast.
Turf Today is brought to you by Toro. Maintaining a golf course demands the right equipment and finely tuned irrigation. Toro has the total solution for both. We're talking mowers, vehicles, sprayers, aerators, and more. They'll also have everything you need for a state-of-the-art irrigation system. No other brand has a more compatible lineup or a stronger network to support you. Find your local distributor at toro.com and see how Toro is always solving and always evolving.
Speaking of getting down there, I mean, it's not easy. I was just looking at hotels and flights and all that right now. It's not cheap to get down there. How do you fundraise, and how do you afford to send kids from your program to be a part of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have just pretty much like any other turf school, we have a turf club. I really encourage these initiatives to kind of be handled by the students. I mean, we help out where we can, but I think it's a good learning proposition for them to kind of independently coordinate and organize amongst themselves. Let's pick, you guys have to pick your teams yourselves. Are you going to go with, A squad, B squad, C squad, top students, and rank it that way? Or are you going to just sort of have like 3 equity-based teams where you've got some, strength divided between all 3?
Just do an A, B, C, D scramble, right? Just put them, just mixing my handicaps.
And then once we kind of know who's committed to going, it's a matter of kind of building a budget. So, X number of students, what's the average cost of a flight? Let's quickly look that up. GCSAA and John Deere have been awesome at putting together pretty low entry cost to get into the show. So it's entirely complimentary for students, which is great. But getting there and staying is where the costs are. So then we start looking at hotels. And the last few years, the students have gotten wise and used Airbnb. So they'll find an Airbnb that can sleep, 12 people, and they get the benefit of having, like a fun escape social networking house. They can have the privacy of preparing or studying if they want. And I think the cost point is lower. They just have to figure out the logistics of getting to the show, because usually they're like a 20 or 25-minute drive outside of where the conference is.
How much studying do you think's really going on in that house that week? Come on, Cam.
Studying.
I've seen some pretty funny photos. One year the students would send me photos, and like last year they had a spot. It had like cornhole in the back. It had a pool. And I think it's a staged photo, but there was a photo sent and they're all in their bathing suits around the pool with like their books out. But I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it was but our students, like, I always got to hand it to them. I'm always impressed at how much effort they put in. And I always try to remind them too, like, just because you worked really hard and you learned a lot doesn't necessarily always equate to coming out in the position that you want, the ranking. And I spoke at Turf Club last year to all the participating students, because there can really only be one winner and only 10 in the top 10. And outside of that, you don't get any kind of recognition. But, to me, and I call it corny, yeah, it's great if you can win and, bump elbows with some of the big schools like Penn State, which I think got like 3 in the top 5 last year, might even be better than that. But just the whole process and the preparing and the organization and the communicating and the time management and the networking to fundraise, which is reminding me, I didn't really actually answer that question. So the students, through their networking, they're building lots of connections during their time in the program. And so some of them, may have a relationship with a salesperson, or, we have some established connections with previous fundraising ventures. So we usually get the students to connect with those people early and say, here's our budget. It's not ironclad, but it's, based in reason. And we're not asking you to pay for our booze, and we're not asking you to pay for our food, but we're looking for you to help us cover flight and accommodation. And here's what those numbers are. And I always try to tell the students it looks a lot better to the fundraiser if it looks like you've got skin in the game too. So like,
sure,
as a group, deciding what's an acceptable amount of financial investment for each student to invest in this opportunity. I really think no one should get a free ride, right? Like that's the motivation, and people work a lot harder and a lot more motivated when there's skin in the game. And we have some amazing industry partners, just like every other school does. This industry is wonderful that way. They're always willing to help out students. And, we usually teams will show up with some swag, and it's got, some equipment, manufacturer, distributor supporting them. And they've got like a chemical distributor or manufacturer. So you never want to have competing brands on your shirt. So you kind of like pick and choose which sponsors are going to work well together. And yeah, it's great. I think in years past, we've had groups donate up to, like $10,000 or more. And then there's some other things with Turf Club too. Like we have a turf golf tournament that we bring alumni to, and there's some money made from that. And there's campus pub nights where they get to charge cover. So there's money coming in. It doesn't all go to Turf Bowl. There's other things as well. You want to spread that wealth for everybody that maybe doesn't get a chance to go there. But there's travel grants here at the university, so we encourage our students to build proposals and submit for those travel grants. Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. And like I said, it's when it's all said and done, you kind of got to sit and take a big breath and like think, like, holy crap, like look at what we just accomplished. We did all this thing. We got there. We did it all ourselves, with some support from some other people, and we didn't come in last.
Yeah. That experience for, empowering the students to find their way and kind of do it on their own is just as valuable as taking the test, right? I mean, those are great life skills for the students to be learning, trying to find their way there. That's awesome. You put that on them.
when you're writing turf bowl, all you want to do is win. But when you
Sure.
have the experience, when you can kind of sit back later in your life and look back on it, that's the part you remember the most. And but that's not to say that we don't want to win. We
Oh, you
do,
got to play to
and
win.
Yeah.
every year we always try to put a strategy in place. But the competitions just got so good, and some of the programs just have some really robust support, and some of them have classes, and we're trying to mobilize ourselves to have something similar so we can compete, because yeah, we would love to win too. And we have a small competition every year. It's not really a real competition, but Olds College in Alberta will go down too, and Jason Pick, who oversees that program, will bring his students. And there's always kind of a like, well, how would you guys do? Oh, okay, well, I guess you're the top school in Canada this year. Oh, now we're the top school in Canada. But obviously that's not really, turf bowl doesn't determine what how good your school is. It's just it's a wonderful event. So if there's any students out there listening that are in like first year of their program and they're hearing mutterings of turf bowl and maybe they missed the boat this year, it's something you should have on your radar for next year.
It's a good idea. And you guys are doing a lot over there. I know we hear more about Guelph more and more as we go. I went there back in 2018 and I didn't even know what the program was like that. And then you get there and you learn about everything and you learn about all the people that have been through that and now that are successful and have careers in the industry. It's amazing. So, I commend you for all the work that you do. Obviously, you're a busy guy with everything going on there, but we're happy to have you on the show today, and we'd love to hear about kind of you, growing up and getting into golf. And I know you worked at a golf course, so getting into all of that, and now, working for the University of Guelph.
I started mowing lawns when I was like 7 years old, or 8 years old or something, and just for cash. And it was sort of like whatever neighbor was within a 2-minute walk was a potential client. And at that stage, I think I never said I wanted to be a turf manager, but I really did enjoy mowing. Like I enjoyed pushing a mower. I enjoyed understanding, when the grass is long and you haven't mowed it in a while, you got to overlap a bit more so the mower's not trying to get through as much and bogging down. And I love the designs that you could do. So I think just early on that sort of planted a seed of like, that would probably come to bloom later. And then around the same time, so I grew up in Aurora, Ontario, and my family moved to Eastern Ontario, Morrisburg, which is about an hour south of Ottawa.
Hmm.
So if there's any Canadian listeners in the Eastern Townships area, my father is actually the director of the St. Lawrence Parks Commission, and so I had access to the Seaway Valley Golf Course. But a 2-minute walk down the road was Morrisburg Golf Club, which was this little 9-hole, like ultra low budget, but like phenomenal course to learn on. And I remember, I I can't remember what the membership price was for a junior. It was something like $120 a year. So
Nice.
like it was an easy sell for my parents, and kind of the golf course ended up being my babysitter. I had a 3-wood, a 7-iron, and a putter. And I think I never took a lesson. I just went out there and I played, and I'd be there playing, 9 holes, 18 holes, 36 holes a day, as much as I could. Like I said, the walk was 3 to 5 minutes down the road from my house. So it was a no brainer. And I loved it. I loved golf. I couldn't get enough of it. Um, and again, another little seed is planted, right? Um, and then we moved away. We moved away from Morrisburg back to Aurora. And Aurora is kind of an affluent town. So there's a lot of golf there, but it's a lot of expensive golf. And a lot of other sports were expensive there too. And so if I was going to keep playing golf, I had to find some way to get golf for free. And I quickly figured out that I could work at a golf course. And it was my mom. I got to credit my mom found a posting for a caddy position at Beacon Hall Golf Club in Aurora. And I went for it. And I think I was about 14 at the time. Um, and that was a really cool job. Became a caddy. I knew enough about the game that I could read yardages, read putts. I'm just this little pissant 14-year-old kid, and I'm carrying bags for relatively successful mostly men with big personalities and big egos. So there was something there too about that job that um, you grow a thick skin. You learn a lot about different kinds of people, how to deal with people, how to take abuse, how to take praise, and play the game a little bit so that you maximize your tip at the end, right? But again, just loved being out on the golf course and being exposed to the game. And so then I think it was in my last year caddying. There was just like tremendous deluge of rain one day, and I don't know if the maintenance team was shorthanded or if there was an event that afternoon. Honestly, can't remember, but there was a bunch of caddy. A bunch of us were just sitting around at the caddy shack, sort of waiting for players to come. Obviously, there was this rain. Play was on hold, and so a call came in to ask if anyone could help push bunker stand up, like repair the bunkers before play. And I was like, yeah, let's go. So that was my first exposure to turf maintenance, and I loved it. Thought it was cool. I'd seen these people driving around, when I was caddying, and they're doing different things. I didn't really think much about it, but I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is kind of cool. I think I like this just as much or more than caddying, right? Like these people arrive and they get to work right away. They don't have to sit and wait for, players to come out and call them. So I didn't transfer to the maintenance team or anything. I just remember, again, a little seed being planted, and uh, I didn't touch golf for a little while after that. I went away from golf. I took a job as a baker at the Great Canadian Bagel in Aurora.
There you go.
And this is in high school still. I can drive now. And that was a really cool job. I did it with one of my best friends. We were both bakers there. That was our summer job. That was good. I did that till the end of high school, and then I went out tree planting. And that should be a whole other podcast, not for you. Like there should just be a podcast on tree planting, because I can't. I'll get trapped in a rabbit hole if I talk about that. But I failed miserably at it. It's a huge.
No.
You got to buy all this equipment. And there's very much a technique. And I was just out with two of my buddies, and we were goofing around, and we didn't really take it seriously. So I was hemorrhaging money. You make about 7 to 10 cents a tree, and you got to pay camp costs. So you got to pay for 3 meals a day. It comes up to about 20 to $25, depending on where you're working for. So you start $25 in the hole, plus all the equipment you bought. Now at 10 cents a tree, you got to put in, if you do some quick math, you're looking at like thousands of trees in order to actually start generating a half decent day. I'm like cresting 200, so I'm barely breaking even on my camp costs, and I'm like, I gotta cut bait and get out of here. So I left. I came home midway through the summer, and took a job at Magna Golf Club. There was a posting to work at Magna, and got on there. Great crew. Wayne Rath, still the superintendent there. Got to work under him. Just an entry level bunker raker. But I loved it. Got to play golf, which was cool. Dave Patterson was the new assistant super. He's now moved on. He's at Summit Golf Club now. Dave was a great guy to work for. Worked hard, partied hard, loved it. And then I tried tree planting again the following year.
Didn't learn your lesson.
I was like,
why not?
I was driven. I was like, I know I can do that, and I want to prove to myself that I can do that. So I went out, and I had a much better year. We made really good money, but for whatever reason, our contracts ended early. So I came back home again. There's still about a month and a half left in the summer, and I finished working that summer at Magna. So I had sort of two half seasons at Magna, and really, really enjoyed it. My last year, so I'm in university now, and it's my sort of last year at university. I tree plant again, and I'm making hand over fist dollar. I'm putting in like 4,000 trees a day, just crushing it, making tons of money. Make so much money, I decided, you know what, I got all this cash, and I don't have any obligations. We're gonna buy a car. The girl I was with, my girlfriend, came out with me. We bought a car. We traveled all around Western Canada, ended up in Jasper. Love Jasper. Like, anyone that's been there is like this magic aura and energy the minute you kind of get off the bus or your car. We ended up in Tofino. We were in Tofino for like a week, and then we decided we got to figure out what to do. Like the fall's coming, and we said, well, we both really like Jasper. There was that hotel there, Jasper Park Lodge. We should apply to work there, and we can snowboard in the winter. There's a snowboard hill not too far called Marmot Basin. So we applied, and we got the job. And in my interview, they're like, "Oh, we see that you've worked at some golf courses. Do you want to work at the golf course at Jasper Park Lodge?" And this is how ignorant I was. I didn't even know there was a golf course there. I didn't even see it. I was on the property for 2 days and I didn't even notice there was a golf course. So I said, "Yeah, great." And that's the rest is history. That's it. I got to Jasper. I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the job. I fell in love with our crew. I was really good at the work. My supervisors might disagree from me at that time because I was still a young, immature person who was focused on partying and having fun. But when I did show up to work, like I worked hard, I did my job, and over the years I matured a little bit, and some opportunities came up. I was very lucky that a longtime supervisor at the property retired, and so a supervisor job came open. Now Jasper's a unionized property, so I didn't have enough seniority to go after it, but I did anyway. And I think that, I mean, this is a good life lesson of like, shoot your shot anytime you can, because you never know. And it just so happened that all these other people ahead of me had more experience, way more knowledge, never applied for the job. No, nobody applied. I don't know if they didn't see it or they just were lazy, or if they didn't want it. I'm not sure. So I got a supervisor's job, and that opened up a whole new world. So now I'm delegating, I'm overseeing a crew. My job is to set up the morning rush. It was kind of like a second assistant's job, really, but it was still a unionized position, so it was called a supervisor. It opened up opportunity to go down and visit Banff. I got more exposed to some other golf courses. And then I'm like, I just remember this epiphany one day. I'm driving up over the ridge of the second hole, sun's rising, frost on the ground. It's frost like every week of the year except for 2 weeks in July in Jasper. And there's like an elk in the background, like a bald eagle soaring, a grizzly bear behind me chewing on some grass. And like, I can see it's a light frost, so you can see there's the morning crew mowing the greens, the hole changer, there's our bunker crew, and like the wave of the fairway mowers is coming through, and I'm like having this coffee, kind of watching this all happen. I'm like, I think this is it. And I that day I went back and I talked to the superintendent. I said, what do I need to do to get into this industry? And he's like, you got to go to school. And so at that time, there was Fairview College, which is in Grand Prairie, Alberta. There was Olds College, which is in Lethbridge, or Olds, Alberta, just south of Lethbridge, I think. There was Kwantlen College, which was in BC. They had a Hort program with a turf sort of side hustle, and Stan Kazimerchik ran that. It had a great reputation. Seneca, which is in Ontario. University of Guelph, which was in Ontario. I think Red River College in Alberta. I remember looking at all of them and ultimately figuring out that coming back to Ontario was the right choice, and settled on the University of Guelph. My wife now, different girl, that the girl I was tree planting with, that we separated, went on different ways on good terms. And I met my wife in Jasper, and she came home with me. And I went to school for 2 years here at the University of Guelph. That was 2010 to 2012. She went to work for Disney Cruise Lines for those 2 years. We stayed together the whole time. It was awesome. And then, like I tell us the students all the time, it goes so fast. Just like that, we had graduated, and now I'm looking for jobs. And I remember, because I had come from out west, I didn't really have a lot of connections here in Ontario. So I came up to Dean Baker, who's a longtime friend and mentor of mine, and I handed him a piece of paper and I said, my wife's got a job in Mississauga, so I know we have to live somewhere around Oakville, Mississauga. I don't want to have to drive more than 30 minutes to get to work and come home. So I here is my zone of tolerable commute.
This is my bubble.
And here is every golf course that is in that bubble. And I said, all I need you to do is kind of go through and just sort of like green check for the ones that are big on developing people and have, a budget that supports activities and renovations and projects. And then I just applied. And again, serendipity is there's sort of a theme in my life. It just so happened that in that moment, Dean got a job at Burlington Golf and Country Club, like within a week of me giving him that piece of paper. And he offered me a job to come and work at Burlington. So when I graduated, I went right over to Burlington with him, worked there 2 wonderful years working under Dean Baker at Burlington Golf and Country Club as the second assistant. 2 years after that, an opportunity came up at Piper's Heath Golf Club, which is like a really nice public family-owned golf course about 2 kilometers north of Oakville. So I went to work for Tim Muse there. Tim's incredibly smart guy, very skilled in all the ways that a superintendent should be. And so that was 4 years there of like just absorbing as much information and skill and knowledge from Tim as I possibly could. And it's kind of funny, and this is an interesting story too. So a job came up at a private club, and I'd been at Piper's for 4 years, and I was like, I think I kind of want to get back into the private club atmosphere. I really enjoy that sense of community and seeing the members who take ownership over the club. And so I applied at a higher end private club, went through the interview, thought I did just great. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. They selected somebody else, and I was kind of bummed about that. And the reasoning I got back was that they sort of felt like I was on like an ascending track, and they wanted to kind of hire someone that was going to be there long term, and they kind of sensed that I was going to come in quickly and kind of maybe go after the next thing, which probably is correct. And so I thought, man, am I at that point in my job where I'm overqualified for a lateral move, but I'm underqualified for an advancement? I knew it was sort of just time for a change, and serendipity again. An opportunity comes up at the University of Guelph to work at the Guelph Turfgrass Institute. It's a full-time job. Got to teach in the Diploma program. Got to be sort of bumping elbows with the researchers and working closely with associations like the OGSA and the OTRF and Sports Turf Canada, Canadian Golf Superintendents Association. It was kind of a really cool high-level like high altitude job where you kind of got to be involved in all different sectors of turf. So took the plunge, did that job for 3 years, and then Steve Fleischauer, who was managing the Diploma program, retired, and I applied for that job, interviewed, and here I am. So that's the flips, the flip book of my career, I guess. And I hope I didn't take that too long.
No, not at all. Just curious. I mean, what is it about the academic side that really kind of drew you back in?
I think from the very first time I started training people on a golf course, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed teaching people how to do the job. And working for Fairmont Hotels, which runs Jasper Park Lodge, they have some really great certification courses for their supervisors. So when I became a supervisor, I got to take, courses on how to communicate, how to lead. And then there was a 2-day seminar called Train the Trainer. And it was a program on how to teach people how to do things and understanding that not everyone learns the same way. Some people can hear you tell instructions and they're fine. Other people need to see it and do it. Some people need to be told 5 times. Some people need to do it 10 times. The art of being a trainer is to figure out how people learn and to manipulate your dissemination of that information in a manner that they can digest it and succeed. And that was a really impactful course, because I remember I still hear this to this day with other people. You're like, here's how you mow a green. You pull start, you choke on the cold start, you pull it, throttle full up, depress the clutch, and then you go. And when you get to the end, you do a spin turn, just one hand. And you kind of like all these things, it's taken you, 8,000 hours to build up these skills. And you're expecting this person to pick it up in a second. And they scalp, and there's, misses, and people get frustrated that they're not learning. Well, that course sort of taught you the patience. And then if someone's sort of not on a development track, you kind of sit back and say, hold on a second. Is it me? Like, maybe I need to teach them a different way. And then you also kind of need to know when to shut it down and say, all right, this is just not the job for you. Let's move you somewhere else. Like, what would you like to do? Let's move you somewhere else. So that was cool. And And so all that love of teaching, and I think some of the experience teaching drew my interest. And you know, if you had asked me in high school if I wanted to be a teacher, I would have told you hell no.
Not
When I
happening.
was from grade 10 to OAC, I was in the last cohort of grade 13 in Ontario. I was a student in a work to rule strike, which is the most crippling kind of strike because the teachers still do their job, but only the bare minimum, and the government's not motivated to change anything because they're still doing their job. And really, the students lose out because there's no extracurricular activities, there's no sports, there's no clubs. The teacher's the first one out of the classroom when the bell rings, so there's no time for questions. That was my entire high school time. There
Oh,
was no teams whatsoever, which is probably why I got away from golf, right? So I really had a disdain for teachers. It rubbed me the wrong way. It really bothered me, and so it's kind of ironic that you know 15, 20 years later I find myself in that role, and now I have a totally new appreciation for the challenge, like how difficult it is to be a teacher. It's it's a really difficult job, and it doesn't maybe seem like it, um, but if you care and you want to make things better, it's a lot of extra time investment, and that not always captured in your job description. And I'm not trying to like paint a sob story here, but it's just kind of interesting how I went full circle from like, oh yeah, maybe they do kind of have it pretty tough. And now I look at a high school teacher's job and I'm like, man, I think I'd rather be teaching at post secondary because my students are adults. Uh, I don't have to hold kids gloves with anyone. Like if you don't show up to class, that's your choice as an adult and a paying student here. Hopefully you do come to class, but I'm not going to chase you down. And I'm not teaching for 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day, which a lot of high school teachers will teach multiple classes, and you've got that class for the day, right? Or so yeah, I really enjoy this job. I miss being on a golf course every single day. Um, but usually when Friday rolls around and I can go home at 3 o'clock and pick my kid up from school, and I've got 2.5 full days with my family, and we can go away to cottages in the summer. Not that nobody can go away to a cottage, but like I can go away to a cottage for 3 weeks if I want in the summer. And these are just some things that you can't do in golf, in the golf business. So really enjoy it. And I've just been trying to, there's a lot of things I want to change. And I think the challenge is probably just like, being a superintendent at a new property. Everywhere you look, there's an opportunity to make it better. And you kind of just have to, okay, what's the most important thing right now? What's going to make the biggest impact with the least amount of time invested? And, and then, you kind of check off these boxes. Okay, now I've got that in place. Where do I go next? So we made some pretty cool changes, but I loved the program when I was a student, so I usually draw upon some of my experience and reflections of the program to sit and think of like, no, that was like something I really enjoyed. Let's keep that, and this, that was something I remember we could have probably done better. So let's improve that a little bit.
Apex 10 is a proud sponsor of Turf Today. And if you haven't checked this product out yet, go to greennature.life. They have some information about the product. They also have some testimonials, just like Vero Beach Country Club, which is located on the east coast of Florida along the Indian River. Their big problem there is salt. They have salt intrusion, and it makes growing that paspalum a challenge. And in spite of the summer drought that they have there, and they had 2 hurricanes, Apex 10 increased the microbial populations and provided excellent stress tolerance and made like 100 pounds of nitrogen available per acre. It's a product to try out. If it's something you want to test, reach out to us, reach out to Apex 10. They have an Instagram account at Apex 10 Life. Part of being a superintendent is being a teacher. You have to be a coach and a teacher and a mentor. So those jobs kind of translate over. And, I wanted to go back quickly to Jasper. Now, you guys must have had some serious wildlife encounters up there because anytime I talk to somebody about turf or golf in Alberta, it's watch out for the wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, where do I start and where do I stop? Uh, elk and bear, coyotes. I mean, you see a lot of coyotes around here. You see elk with the frequency that you would see squirrels here in Ontario. And I might
Wow.
be exaggerating a little bit, but like they kind of move in packs, right? And the Jasper Park Lodge is positioned outside of town. They're maintained grounds, so like there's irrigation systems for the turf on the golf course and the hotel property. Um, Guess what? Elk eat grass, and there's no irrigation watering luscious grass anywhere else in that valley. So they want to be on the property and they want to be on the golf course. And so, particularly in the spring, as winter subsides, we used to use tarps to kind of get our greens going early in the spring, so that when golf came, maybe the course is still waking up. There's still some snow mold that needs to be dealt with, but the greens are, relatively green and growing. And when you pull those tarps off, I swear that sweet smell of luscious grass just like emanates and wafts through the valley.
Here
And
they
then
come.
any grazing animal wants to be there. So it's not uncommon once you start pulling tarps off, and you have to be careful because the grass gets really lush and warm and soft under those tarps, because it's this beautiful little greenhouse. And Jasper has some incredible temperature fluctuations. Like you could hit highs of 20 in the day, but then at night it still drops back below zero again. In the sun, it's a very warm sun there. So you have to kind of harden the grass off a little bit. You don't just take the tarps off and walk away. You kind of have to slowly get that grass hardened off a little bit before you let it out. But once you kind of pull those tarps off, it's like every bear and every elk around knows, and they all come in. And so they're square tarps on circular greens. So there's these little triangles on the edge where the rough is just like,
Oh
you
yeah.
almost see it blowing in the wind, right? And that's where they'd always camp out. You'd usually see most of the time as black bear, uh, a mother and some cubs sitting there munching away. And our job, once the course opens and golf is there, part of our job is to get the wildlife off the course as much as possible, particularly the wildlife that poses the greatest risk. Um, and so, yeah, if we heard there was a bear on the course, we'd go and we call it hazing. You sort of haze the bear off the course, and you try not to use bangers. And there's some strategies to it. Like if you chase a bear, you fire a bear banger, which is like a little firecracker at it. It scares it. It starts running, but then you see it going into the forest, and then you just turn around and drive away. It's like a Pavlovian response mechanism. They're like, "Oh, all I do is I run this way for 20 minutes. He drives away, and then I can go back out and eat the grass again." So you have to follow through with the pushing of the animal off the property. And then if you time it right, once golf kind of comes, they just don't want to be there anymore because they don't want to be around people. So it's like at night, the golf course goes back to the jungle, and then during the
Yeah.
day, humans need it back again because we need people to play. Um, so yeah, there's encounters with bear. I mean, 99% of the time, these animals don't like loud sounds, and they don't like things driving at them. And so you learn to read their body language. If there's a grizzly bear out there, it knows it's at the top of the food chain. It's not moving as fast as the other ones. And you can keep your distance, and you just, is this an aggressive posture? Is this a passive posture? Okay, I'll just stay here. And eventually they kind of loaf their way off the property. It gets really, the highest risk animal is probably the elk, because in the spring, I'm gonna make sure I remember this properly. In the spring, the females are calving, so they have their babies, and they get really territorial around their babies. Um, and so you'll have a lot of really aggressive females that are difficult to push if there's a baby present, and there's usually sort of like an alpha female in that herd that's all the cows or the female elk. Um, and then in the fall, you have the males that go through the rutting. So now the males have their big, you know, 8 foot antlers that are basically just like onboard plows. Um, and they battle, they duke it out, and like you drive out on the course, there's two elk fighting right in front of you, and like you're not going to be able to move them very quickly. You kind of, again, you just camp out, make your presence known. Eventually they kind of wise up, they know you're there, and they'll move off. um, However, once the males have kind of established their dominance, then they start to go through the rutting part, which is now they will corral the female herd or a harem, and the male will protect them. So that one single alpha male will sort of move around with that herd. And if they accidentally make their way on the course, now you've got to move a very territorial male with two giant, antlers on it. And they're not small. They're not like deer. They're huge. They're
Big
big
boys.
animals, and when they're in their aggressive state, they're not easy to get to back down. So we had these things are called hazing rods. So Parks Canada would come in and usually sort of give us a little bit of a training. And the hazing stick is really just like a coho wooden hockey stick with the blade cut off and a bunch of caution tape on the end. It's kind of like a little pom pom, and you shake it, and the sound and the sort of unpredictable movement of the caution tape, I guess, sort of just like helps encourage them to leave. And I remember, I don't know if this is a joke, but I remember my first training for that when the warden came, and he's like, "Yeah, so we're like, what if the elk doesn't go away when you're hazing it?" And he says, "Oh, well, like, you just get up and you hit him on the nose." And I'm like, I'm not like, if I walk up to hit that elk on the nose and he bows his head, I am now surrounded by antlers. Like, you know. But so that's where not everyone moves wildlife, right? Like trusted parties, mature individuals have the responsibility of moving wildlife, and you learn how to move and read them, like I was saying earlier. Um, yeah, I mean, we had wolves one time, only one time that I can remember. On hole number 3, we had a pack of wolves that set up shop, and I remember mowing fairways and having a wolf like trailing my fairway mower up and down as I was doing lines. And it got as close as coming up to the back wheel of my fairway mower, sort of smelling it. Just curious. They're curious creatures. After a few weeks, though, they were getting used to human presence. And I think on 2 occasions, we saw a wolf coming up the fairway after a golf group came through. So we report that to Parks Canada. Parks has a very sort of laissez-faire philosophy about wildlife. It's sort of like, this is their place, and as long as there's no major problems, we're just going to let life be life, right? But when there starts to be risk or concerns about comfortability with human presence, particularly with bear and wolves and predators, they'll come out. And I think they just kind of use like these little sandbags or like little soft rubber bullets. And it just sort of encourages the pack to move on and find another spot. On occasion, if you have a problem animal that has found food, they'll come back, right? Just like when you don't feed the bears, right? That's why we say that, because once they get the taste of the food or that beautiful grass, they just want to keep coming back. And so when things get out of hand, then Parks Canada will trap them. They'll have a big bear box and they'll trap the bear, and they'll go to great lengths to move it off site. But if I can remember correctly, the chances of that bear finding its way back is very high. So it's a lot of resources to move something, and in most cases they just kind of end up coming back. And again, the reason why they're so strict about encounters is once an animal has become comfortable with people, you can't teach it otherwise, and usually it ends up in the animal dying, which is tragic. So good news is that didn't happen too much. I was there for 5 years. I can count on one hand the number of times we had like really, really scary encounters. And most of the time it's a tourist that was doing something they shouldn't have done, right?
Of course.
I was going to ask, yeah, if that wolf encounter was your closest call, or if you had any scary incidents.
I've had a few where I was trying to push a male elk it was protecting a harem. So I'm not sure if you know Jasper Park Lodge Golf Club very well, but there's a very famous par 3 called Bad Baby. It's a short 120-yard pitching wedge from the tips. Like, it's a beautiful short par 3, but a very challenging green site. So perched green, very small. If you miss it, your ball bounces off. Anyways, that's out on a peninsula in Lac Beauvert, which is the lake that Jasper Park Lodge is situated on. And so it was a sort of a favorite spot for the males to kind of push these females, because then they push them into the corner and then they can stand guard, right? Like, and they could control them. So every now and then some elk would kind of get out there. And once they're out on the peninsula, you have to haze them all the way back and get them off the peninsula, because there's three golf holes on that peninsula. So that was always challenging. And there's been a few times where it's me and a male elk, and I'm probably, memory always exaggerates things, but my memory, I feel like I'm 60 feet or 100 feet from this thing with only a hazing rod, kind of like,
Pom pom.
go, go, go. And, when there's maybe another worker one worker would distract the male, and the other worker runs around behind and moves the females, because you can't move the male. He's stubborn, right? Some male listeners might be resonating.
Sounds
with this.
right.
So, or maybe female listeners. So anyways, one person distracts, the other person pushes the harem. And then once the harem starts moving, the male's like, he's motivated to go with them. Right. So, yeah, most of the really scary stuff happens in town away from the lodge. It's when people see a bear on the side of the highway, they pull over, they all want to take photos. I mean, I've heard stories, I never saw this, but I've heard stories of tourists giving their kid an apple to try to feed a bear and get a picture. Bears will climb up a tree, and then people crowd around it and take photos, and the bear gets stressed, and that's when you start to run into really serious problems. So, yeah, I mean, over the year, I've seen two elk fighting, and one elk broke another elk's neck, killed the elk.
Wow.
I've seen an elk drown another elk, always males. One year we had an elk go through the ice. I think I wrote this in the questionnaire. It's like zombie elk head. So this elk went through the ice in the winter, and it gets pretty cold. It was like -30 or -35 or something there. And so it broke through the ice. Now you'd think, why isn't the ice super thick if it's -35? Well, a lot of the lakes are fed from underground rivers. So you get these kind of warm swells where the ice might be thinner than it is in other areas. So an elk went through, it kind of froze in place, like it died and it froze in place, and its head was still out of the lake, but frozen and dead.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously a predator saw that as an opportunity and like came and basically like I don't know if it was like one coyote or a team of coyotes or like a series of different predators, and then maybe like a crow or a raven, but this thing got like not picked clean. It kind of looked like a skull with a lot of ground beef left on it. And we had reported that in, because the way it came was that someone was walking, like a tourist was walking around the lake and saw it and was like, "Oh my god,
what is
and
that?"
So reported it to us, and we had reported it into Parks. And I want to say like the initial response from Parks was like, "Great, the predators get some food," like laissez-faire. I do think they ended up taking it out, though. Again, some of these memories are a little foggy, but I do think they ended up removing it because it was like it was going to stay there the whole winter.
Little statue out there in the water for everyone.
Yeah. There was definitely some cool stuff. We had a pack of coyotes take down a mule deer on our 6th green, and actually in the process of taking out this deer, like the deer disemboweled itself, so all of its contents of its stomach and colon just like came out, and so there's a lot of stomach acid there. So that was an interesting spot repair. I've always thought about maybe sending that one into the GCSAA's magazine for what happened here. Because it was this big not quite as bad as what you'd expect from like gasoline or hydraulic fluid, but some pretty strong acid that had some blight on the turf and obviously got into the root zone. So that little area kind of was rough for a little bit. It's funny.
Put that one in the study guide for the turf hole. Right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
What disease is this?
Yeah.
It's not a regret, but the kind of bittersweet part about working in Jasper was all that happened before I'd gone to school. So like my ability to see and understand what was happening and maybe be more a part of like the management related discussions, and understand sort of how all these things were happening were affecting the daily goals. Like I just wasn't quite there yet. So I think back about these things. I'm like, man, like, these are like just really unique all mountain properties deal with it. Like if anyone that's listening was from, Banff or another property in the Rockies that deals with elk, like these are regular things that happen in a lot of different places. And probably the most crippling from a turf maintenance standpoint is you get these really thick frosts in Jasper. So you'd have full, no cloud, full sun in the morning. It's -10 with humidity, so there's a lot of dew forming, and then that just freezes solid, and the place is just stiff until noon. We always used to say, okay, frost, it's going to be a 12 o'clock shotgun. But all the while, we're keeping the golfers off, but there's like 40 elk on walking through a tee box down the fairway. They're on the greens. And I got to say, Jasper's lucky because we have a wildlife corridor. It's specifically for the elk. And again, my memory's failing me, but there's only a small number of the golf holes at Jasper Park Lodge are accessible by the elk. In most cases, you shouldn't see an elk on the golf course outside of that corridor. And every now and then one kind of sneaks through the fence somehow or whatever. But Banff, the elk can go on any hole that they want anytime, or at least maybe things have changed since I was out there. So it's not uncommon to go and play Banff, and it looks like someone was out in stilettos tap dancing in the frost. And I always felt bad for Banff there because their greens are slightly smaller. And yeah, the elk can really kind of take over everything. And sometimes there's not really a lot you can do. You just you go out there with your ball mark repair tool, you try to do the best job you can. And then, top dressing, cutting, a little bit of growth, and eventually it all kind of blends in until the next time they come out. So it's heartbreaking, but you kind of get used to it, and it never gets easy, but I guess it gets a little easier. Yeah, those mountain properties are they're cool, man. And like I often wonder, had I not been at Jasper, I might not have found the fuel to light that passion in the same way. I'm a really big outdoors person. I love nature. I love the natural world. So being able to do all those things while being surrounded by animals and mountains and to be able to wrap up work at 2:30 on a Friday and within 30 minutes be in a glacial fed lake fly fishing for rainbow trout,
That's insane.
surrounded by mountains. There was this Moline Lake has this section. It's further down. You can't quite get there in 30 minutes, but it's called the Hall of the Gods, and it's just this beautiful channel that's got beautiful steep slope mountains on both sides. And it's like as you canoe through it, there's no motorized boats allowed in the lake. So as you're canoeing through it, it's like you feel like you're entering Valhalla or something,
Yeah.
And if you got a fly in the water, you got a fish on, it's like nothing beats that, man. So I often wonder, I'm like, man, if I just stayed at, a club in Ontario, would I have found the same kind of passion for it? And I hope the answer is yes. I don't know, but
Yeah, hard to say. So that after school was 2012, you won an award through the GCSAA in Toro, which took you overseas. We'd love to hear about that trip. That sounds amazing.
okay, yeah. So it was the CGSA, the Canadian. It
Can I
was
read that
put on
again?
by this I think
CGSA.
you
Yep.
said
There you go.
GCSA.
I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the Canadian Golf Superintendents Association and Toro, I don't think there was anyone else involved, used to have this award. I'm kind of I feel like maybe I'm a bit ignorant. I don't know if it still exists. If it does not exist in the same capacity that it used to be. So the award would go out to any Canadian turf school, as I understand, and the sort of program managers would nominate, 1 to 2 students that they felt were most deserving of maybe winning that award, which would sort of have to do with academic excellence, community involvement, participation in industry events, and a demonstration of, aspirations to become a golf course superintendent. So unbeknownst to me, my name got put into the hat for that award. And the award was a 6-week, all expenses paid trip to Scotland and Ireland to work at about 5 to 6 different golf courses each week. And I shouldn't say work, I should say volunteer, because there was no visa. Um, so you'd be at a property for a week, you'd work with some people, you do sort of general tasks, or if they had a project, you'd contribute to the project, and then the week ended and you'd move on to a new property. And it also included a all expenses paid trip to the Toro headquarters in the Minneapolis or Twin Cities. And then it also included a fully expenses paid trip to the Canadian Golf Superintendents Association conference that year. So like this was the award. It was, I don't think there was anything else like it. And to my knowledge, I think there was one in the US and there was one in Australia, and there might have been one in Europe. So sort of like all the major continents and countries that were in, the golf industry were a part of this, and there'd be a winner from each one. So if they flew me out to Calgary, I did an interview with a panel. It was the first time I ever interviewed with a panel of people, and they asked me about my time in the program. They asked me about my aspirations. They asked me about my work experience, and I found out one day that I won the award. I almost collapsed in tears. I was so happy. And then I had to go to Dean. I just graduated, so I was working for Dean Baker at the time, and I had to go to Dean being like, oh, by the way, I need 7 weeks off.
Yeah. Thanks for the job. I need all this time off.
So we had just ground through one of the toughest summers. That 2012, that year I graduated, was one of the hottest, driest summers on record.
No.
And Burlington had some very, very sick annual POA on that property. And so we grinded through that year, hand watering, just keeping that place alive. And we did such a good job. Anyways, when I told Dean about this, he came up and he hugged me and he was so happy. And he went a step further, not only gave me the 7 weeks off, but he went to bat for me, and the club supported continuing to pay me for the entire time that I was on that trip. So
Wow.
that was like a really, really cool and flattering experience. And it kind of taught me a lot about, the importance of taking care of the people below you. And I just remember how good that made me feel for him to, we'd only been working together for a short period of time, but for him to go out and, as a new superintendent, put his neck out and make that request was pretty awesome. So yeah, then I went over there, and it's funny because as I was crossing through the gates in Scotland, Scotland, I was getting out of Edinburgh Airport, and I accidentally mentioned when I was crossing customs that I was working at these golf courses, and the guy was like, "Okay, where's your visa?" And then I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, no, I didn't mean work. It's a volunteer program, and here's the letter from the association. They instructed me to give this to you, and in the letter it also said the word work." And so they held me, and the manager of the Elmwood College, which is now called SRUC, the Scottish Rural University College, her name was Carol Borthwick. She's since retired. She had to come in and vouch for me. And so then I got released. And so the first week was at St. Andrews. I should have done a better job of preparing some photos to share with you. I could have shared my screen, but so the apartment I stayed in the first week it's in the top floor of the St. Rule Club, which is the women's golf club at St. Andrews Old Course. And it's just, kitty corner to the 18th green. And so my apartment, the view from my apartment looks out onto the 18th green.
Wow.
Out onto the first tee with the RNA to the right, and then the Atlantic Ocean and the dunes. So I was there for the first week, and I was working at Kingsbarns Golf Club. So right out of the gate, my very first job was at Kingsbarns Golf Club, which was just down the road. It was a brand new build made to kind of look like a really old-timey links golf course. Some listeners are probably familiar with it. It's a beautiful golf course. The superintendent there was Innes Knight. He's an awesome guy. And so I worked the 5 days of the Alfred Dunhill Links circuit, which is the old course at St. Andrews, Kingsbarns, Carnoustie, and then I think they come back to the old course on the last day. So I was working the leg of that tournament that was at the Alfred, or that was at Kingsbarns. Kingsbarns came to a close. I packed up, and my second week was that I was going to spend some time at Elmwood College, which is in County Fife. That was where their turf program was. And there was some sort of mistake in the calendar. So like I showed up at Elmwood College. I was supposed to sit on some like turf classes and meet instructors and stuff. And I show up, and there's like nobody in the parking lot. And I go up and check a door, and the door's locked. And I'm like, what is going on? I send some emails, like check my schedule. I'm like, yes, I'm supposed to be here this week. This is bizarre. And I send an email to the CGSA, and I send an email to Carol Borthwick, who is sort of like the Scottish lead. That was sort of, I guess you could say, if I had a handler while I was there, that would have been Carol. So no response for a little while. And then a guy comes out of the school, and he says, "Oh, can I help you with something?" And I said, "Yeah, my name's Cam Shaw. I'm supposed to be here for a week learning with some turf students." And he kind of chuckles, and he's like, "Well, you're gonna have a hard time doing that because they're on reading week." And I said, "No way." So my head's spinning, and this is again a little pattern here, serendipity. This guy's name is Gord Nemo. If Gord's out there and he's listening, like, it is a huge thank you to him. It just so happens that Gord's job is to go and visit turf interns that are on work placements. And guess where he's going that day? Muirfield, Musselburgh, which is the oldest golf course in the world, and Gullen. So these three like phenomenal like properties. And he's like, "You want to come?" I was like, "Yeah." So I hop in the car with Gord, and we go to these three properties and meet with the students. I'm just a fly on the wall. I got to walk a few holes at Muirfield when they were there. I didn't get to play. I didn't have my clubs with me. So we finished that day, and I was super appreciative to Gord. And he was like, "Well, you got a week. I suggest you rent a car and go like see Scotland." And so I did. I wrote an email to the CGSA and kind of explained what happened. And I said, I'm kind of stuck here. Do you mind if I go and rent a car? And I actually was going to save a bit of money in the long term because when I go to Ireland, I was supposed to fly over. So there's a plane flight there. And I looked at the prices, and for me to rent a car for the time I was there was like, it was comparable. And I got a lot more freedom. So I rented a car. For the rest of the time I was there, I had a car.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And so for that week, I just visited golf courses, Crail Golf Society. I went out to the Castle course at St. Andrews, which was it was like a newer build. I got to play a few of the courses at St. Andrews. And there's another cool course called Kingarock, which is owned by the Scottish National Trust. It was a golf course that was sort of bequeathed to this charitable organization that sort of recognizes history of Scotland, and it's maintained near true to how a course would have been maintained in like the early 1900s. So there's there's weeds everywhere, and the greens are mowed at like a half an inch. But you can play with hickory clubs and a gutta percha golf ball. You do a little shot of scotch before you do the first tee. So that was cool. That was like one of the coolest experiences I had there, was going to play Kingarock. I just did it by myself. And then I went to my second leg, which was Turnberry. So after that, it was my third week, second golf course, Turnberry Golf Club. This is before Trump bought it. So I worked a week on the Ailsa and the course. I can't remember what the name of the other one was. They were in the process of converting all their sod wall bunkers to just like a standard sort of like rustic edge bunker, because it was just cost too much to maintain and redo all the time. That was a neat experience. Got to play golf there a few times. Took a ferry from Stranraer, which is the closest port town to Turnberry, over to Northern Ireland, and stopped in at Royal County Down. I got a full course tour with the superintendent there, which was awesome. Stayed in County Down for the night. Went up to Royal Portrush, then came back down because I had a little extra time, and I ended up in Portmarnock. Now there's two Portmarnocks. There's the world famous Portmarnock, and then there's also the Portmarnock Resort Hotel and Links, which is designed by Bernard Langer. And so I was at the Resort Hotel in Links, and some people get the two mixed up. They're both phenomenal properties, obviously. So I worked a week there. That was cool. Actually, at this time, Twitter was still kind of early in its infancy, and I had started chatting with a guy named Dr. John Dempsey, which may ring a bell. And I sent him a note. I was just like, "Hey, I'm in Ireland. What's up?" And John is a superintendent at the Curragh Golf Club, and I went out to visit him, and I met with his wife. We had tea, and that sort of sparked a really fun long-term relationship that I still maintain to this day. I haven't chatted with John in a recent while, but every time we see each other, it's really cool. So that was kind of neat. Went down south to County Wexford. I got to attend. It was like a very sort of I don't know, like a really private links conference. So it's only for superintendents of true links courses. Like you can't just like attend this. You have to be at a real true links golf course, and here's the criteria of what a true links golf course is. And if you don't meet all that criteria, you are not at this conference. So that I got to go and sort of be a fly on the wall, listening to all these superintendents talk about the pressures and the stresses on that are sort of a threat to true links, which is tourism, right? Everyone wants the tourism, and so to get tourism, American golfers want green, lush properties. And so there's this pressure to constantly move away from what a true links is. And they were sort of sharing ideas on communicating with ownership and what's happening at your club. And then there was, some talks on overseeding practices and cultivars of fescue. Was really, really cool. Again, way over my head because I just graduated school, but kind of trying to swallow up as much as possible and navigate through a thick Irish accents.
Oh yeah.
So that week ends. I come back to Scotland and I go up to Castle Stewart, and I got to work for Chris Haspel there. And Chris is just an awesome. That might have been one of my favorite stops. And it's not to degrade anyone else. Like they were all really great, but Chris was just a really interesting guy. He's super, super smart. Had lots of like interesting fescue trials going, and he was playing around with different kinds of heather and locations to put heather to add like interesting textures on the property. So I really enjoyed that week at Castle Stewart, and he gave me a day to go up and visit a few Scotch distilleries, and I got to play Brora Golf Course, which is a really awesome. I see you nodding, Brian. Have you been there?
I've never been, but no, I've seen lots of different videos and whatnot about it.
Just a really special place. If you hadn't heard of it, Adam, it's just like sort of a bare bones golf course, beautiful layout. And they have sheep, like the sheep graze a lot of the areas. They don't have a huge staff, and so they kind of leverage a lot of the grazing to keep periphery areas intact, but they kind of get free roam. So at every green site, there's these stakes and an electric fence around every single green. And then at the section where you chip on the green, now I got to go putt. How do I get on there? So they have like a little rubber hose, like a residential hose over that electric fence, so you can kind of straddle it and go make your putt and then walk off. And it's been a while since I've been there, so they may have like changed that slightly. I don't know, but like it is worth the trip. It was really cool, and it's not too far from Royal Dornoch as well. So
do you think they move that little hose piece every day so they don't get the wear patterns?
I'm sure they do.
Same spot.
I'm sure they do. Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Different problems over there, eh? That's so smart.
Yeah, traffic seems to be, I'm not going to speak on behalf of a links manager, but traffic seems to be the biggest problem, right? It's like constant perpetuation of the tiller, creating more growth power, lots of injection of seed to just keep new life coming up as the old life kind of gets pounded out. A lot of push and pressure for increased carts as the tourism demands it. A lot of, old guys that have saved up their whole life, but they finally can afford their dream trip and they can't walk 18 holes anymore. Yeah. So there's a lot of demand for golf or for carts. That just doesn't jive with fescue. So traffic's a big problem. They used a lot of those black mats. I don't know if they're track mats, but it's very similar to track mats. It pretty much every tee box has them leading up because of just the goat trail from people walking there. anyhow, yeah. So my circuit, I finished up at Castle Stewart. On my way back, I decided to go the long way. So I go up to Nairn, Aberdeen, where I got to go and play around at Trump Aberdeen, which was a really hot topic at that time. Donald Trump had just sort of bought this property, and there was some accusations that he had falsified his family history, and like I don't know, there's a whole documentary on it. It's quite fascinating. Anyways, like unbelievable property, probably one of the most stunning properties I set foot on my trip. That was really great. Got to go to Royal Aberdeen, which I got the connection there because I had worked with someone at the Alfred Dunhill Links at Kingsbarns that came from Royal Aberdeen. So I kept his number. And when I was passing through, he took me out for a tour. Finished off at the old course and got to work for a week at the old course, rebuilt ginger beer bunker and two or three others. I can't remember. They all have names. I can't remember the other two. Ginger
Yeah.
beer kind of stuck with me. And got to play. I got to play the old course. That was a nice little
Wow.
cap off.
Nice.
So yeah, and my parents actually came out and visited with me while I was there, and I had arranged to stay in that room again at the St. Rule Club, and so my parents stayed there, and I got to hang out with my parents in Scotland for a week. We went and got some fish and chips, and uh, walked
What
the
an
old course together.
experience. Holy
Yeah,
moly.
yeah, and then I came home, and I was right back to work again. So
Yeah.
the phenomenal once in a lifetime experience kind of marred a little bit in the fact that I had no one to share it with. I was alone for a lot of that trip, and I there's this one memory I keep coming back to, and I'm on as the sixth green of Royal Portrush, the U.S. Open or the British Open course, sorry. And I'm looking out at the ocean. I'm trying to take photos to like capture this moment, and it's like it's just not translating into the photo, and like the smell of the ocean isn't there and the wind on my face isn't there, and I'm like I just want someone to like I can look at and like hug or like just appreciate this moment with. And I'm hardly complaining. It was a really phenomenal trip. And um yeah, so it doesn't exist anymore, and it's unfortunate. I kind of understand that is a huge cost to do that. And I'm sure somewhere the justification on the return on investment may not have been easily tracked. And so I would love to see something like that come back. It's always nice to see those awards and to give them to people when they're young and mobile and they can go out and see the world and meet people and just have a bigger understanding. We often just sort of think about our own property or our own community, and it's just such a big world, and there's so many different kinds of grass, and there's so many different kinds of challenges and stresses and culture related differences, and it's pretty cool. And I really encourage anyone, if they have the opportunity and the mobility, to get out and just take a bigger piece of the turf pie in the world, because it's pretty cool. And people are just as cool. The people are just as good everywhere. Like everything we know about turf here, the people are the exact same. And they're just like salts of the earth, love sharing information, welcoming, hospitable.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I was going to ask, is that something that you try and impart upon your students? When they're looking for internships or jobs or something, is that something you encourage them to do, is try and travel a little bit and get away?
Yeah, I try. As much as possible, I like to encourage them to be their own driver. I don't want to have any kind of, I mean, my job is to advise and influence in the manner that sort of enhances their own ability to make their own decisions instead of making decisions for them. But we have students that come in from properties where they have a wonderful relationship with the previous superintendent. They might have worked there for 3 or 5 years or maybe 1 year, and they'll have an offer on the table when they come into the program, like, I'd love for you to come back and do your internship here, and there will be a job waiting for you when you graduate. Because the superintendent loves the certainty of the contributions of that individual, and hiring is a highly uncertain practice, right? So when you've got somebody, you kind of want them to come back. So those offers are there, and the students usually come in and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go back to my old club. But then they start to see the opportunities rolling in, right? And they'll have a speaker from Turf Club. 1 year we had Steve Rabideau from Winged Foot. It's just like a massively impressive individual, just like all superintendents are.
Was he smoking the cigar when he came and did his talk?
I don't think he was. I remember asking
Okay.
him because you
Okay.
could see the humidor. It's like it's in the video when he's on the screen because it's like it's right
Oh
behind his desk.
yeah.
And I think I asked him what kind of cigars he was smoking, but he has charisma and he's got presence, and obviously the property sells itself, and so then students are like, "Holy, like that's like I can do that." Like I didn't. I mean, I know you said I could kind of go anywhere, but now like this is really kind of setting in, and I'm like, yeah. Like, what's your favorite horse of all time? Cypress Point. Okay, I can't guarantee we're going to get you there, but part of my job is to find the connections and the names and the email addresses and give you the best possible shot at finding the job that's right for you. And so, they go through these phases of I'm going to go back to where I came from because I'm comfortable there. And then it's like, whoa, hold on a second. I can kind of go anywhere and do anything. And I can go and work a US Open, or I can go and work at the British Open, or I can take a year off school and just go work in Australia and come back. I'll defer my second year. I'll come back and finish it after. So then everything like erodes, and then they don't know what to do, and they kind of go through this panic of like maybe one or two other students are relatively confident about what they're going to do, so they lock something up, and then that puts the pressure on everyone.
Yeah.
Should I have locked something up right now? So I always try to tell the students if there's somewhere specific you want to go, we should probably try to set that up sooner than later because likely there's other people that want to go there too, and there's only a limited number of jobs. So there can be a ticking clock to some of these opportunities. Like if you want to go and work at Oakmont, like you need to have your application in the first week. We didn't even get postings from Oakmont this year because they're hosting the U.S. Open. Like they're not gonna like everyone's coming back. The I guess the spectrum of emotions they go through, and then they usually come back and then they start asking for advice, and I kind of say, okay, well let's boil this down. What are the things you're really good at? Okay, well I'm a good operator. I've got lots of irrigation experience, but I've never been part of a project. I'd like to shape a tee box, or I'd like to install a drain, or I've never done this kind of irrigation repair. Okay, so we kind of got a set of skills we need to button up, right? You got strengths and you got weaknesses. So let's try to close those gaps. Then it's like, do you want to stay home? Do you need to be near home? Are you interested in going out west? Do you fancy that later in your life you might want to be in the Rockies? So working out there and getting some experience might be of value to you. Do you have a dual citizenship somewhere? Can we leverage those opportunities? Some students just love travel. So it's like, if there's any way that I could accomplish my learning outcomes, but also see the world, let's make that happen. And I loved the episode with Mike O'Keefe because like he's really like the guy if you want to send people down into the US. He's just got so many amazing connections. And I've found, I don't know, since COVID, I don't know what it is, and maybe this is just an anecdotal observation, but I've noticed a significant decrease in interest to go abroad. Students talk about it, but visas are expensive. To get into the U.S. is very difficult. It's not an easy country to get into. We can get student visas. Guys like Mike O'Keefe can expedite that, but it's got a timeline to it. You're not a student forever. And then if you want to go and stay in the U.S. long term, now you're looked at as someone that's coming and displacing an American job, right? And it can be really tricky to try to keep people in the U.S. long term. And we've had a lot of students go down to the U.S. over the years, and a lot of them end up coming home because they get exhausted having to go through the application process. The State Department scrutinizing their reasoning for being there becomes increasingly difficult to re-justify why you're there. We've had a few students that have been successful. Denver Hart, who's at PGA West, has been remarkably successful. He would be a great person to have on this podcast. Lauren Lasocha, who was at Bel Air Country Club. I think Justin DePippo referred to her when he was in the podcast. She's just a remarkably impressive young woman and has been successful to get her green card, I think. Lucas Andrews, who's at TPC Sawgrass, he actually had his UK citizenship and his Canadian citizenship, went down to the US, was such an impressive young man. They kind of wanted to keep him at Sawgrass and was able to stay there long term. So there are some properties and some individuals that managed to make it happen, and others, no fault of their own, just kind of only so many can stay, right? So I think there's a bit of a deterrence there in terms of financial investment. There's a lot of extra work to do. And it's not to say that the students are lazy. It's just like you can just get some really great experience here in Canada too, right? Like there's some really impressive golf courses with amazing internship programs here. And if you're going to be running your career here, it's a pretty good value proposition to stay here and start building your network and get in so that when you graduate, you already have an established career path somewhere and you're not maybe starting over from scratch when you come back from your internship. So there's a lot of different strategies and probably a really long-winded way of just sort of saying that we work with the students as much as they want our advice, and we try to encourage them to ask themselves the most meaningful questions and do as much investigation to make sure that the personalities jive too. I think that's important to understand, like, this is, you know, this student's strengths and weaknesses and has this kind of personality. Well, you know, they may not do well at this property because of their quirks. And, you know, there's just like, it's nothing wrong with either side. Just some people don't get along, or they don't jive the same way, or they don't like the cut of each other's jibs. So you want to, if you can harmonize that as much as possible, that's a big key to success. And I know that Mike O'Keefe talked about that too.
He was a great guest, the international stud. What a guy.
A-Plus Rewards are back. The Anderson's A-Plus Rewards program offers turf managers the best opportunity to save on our newest and most popular products this fall. Earn rewards on purchases of Contec DG, Voltec SG, Castaway DG, Carbon Coat, and more. Don't miss this opportunity. The average reward for last year's program, more than $250. For a complete list of qualifying products, visit andersonspro.com. Offer available to U.S. customers only.
Getting into this industry, you know, what are some of the things that we can do to really get people excited about the industry, you know, get them working at golf courses, get them working for companies, or, you know, get them applying for schools and programs like your own? What kind of advice would you have for that?
I think you guys are doing, I think, exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And that's why I sent you that snippet from one of our applications. We've had two of those now. One application came in to us that said, they had heard our GTI Canada Turf Talks podcast, which has just kind of taken a hiatus recently because it's a massive time investment and we couldn't commit to it consistently. But that, listening to those episodes and those people had piqued that individual's interest and they applied into the program. And then when this most recent applicant had cited listening to Turf Today and had heard our program mentioned on there, probably through, you know, Mark Prieur, and I think, you know, guys like Mike O'Keefe made reference to it, and it's always in a positive light. And so we become sort of like an accessible pathway for them, and that's great. So really, I think to get people in, there has to be people carrying the banner. We can't be passive about it. No one is talking about turf to young people except us. Guidance counselors, for the most part, are not aware of this career path. They're not aware that there's an educational post-secondary offering. Teachers, I think sometimes parents may, if a student does express interest, the parents may like push them somewhere else. There's probably some pressure that way. So we started getting out into high schools for career days. There's an event here in Waterloo called Guess My Career, and I go to it when I can. I just sit up at the front of the room. Students ask you yes or no questions. You know, do you work outside? Yes. Do you work in a team-based environment? Yes. Do you work with your hands? Yes. You know, do you have an office? Yeah. And anyways, after they ask all these questions, then they have to guess what you do. And of course, nobody ever guessed superintendent. I always guess like lumberjack or something.
Take you back to the tree planting days.
So after it's over, then I get a chance to stand up and talk about the industry and my career path. And I get to talk about working outdoors and working with people and mowing grass and like, does anyone here love sports? Of course, hands go up. What sport do you play? Soccer. Great. There's a turf manager for that soccer field. Someone looks after that soccer field. Would you be interested in that kind of an opportunity? Oh yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Okay. How about you? Oh, I play football. Well, you know, who's your favorite NFL team? Oh, okay. Well, it's a Green Bay. All right. Well, guess what? Lambeau Field is a giant USGA golf green with, whatever Kentucky blue and perennial rye cultivar being grown on there. I could be way off here, but the point is like there's something here for you, and like if you can take something you love and then find a career path that's kind of close to that, that's the best you could probably hope for loving your job. And that's a really important part of being happy. And I think that's what's really important to a lot of young people right now is work-life balance and being happy. And I think our industry's kind of starting to come around and understand that. There's a lot more people advocating for mental health and um, being able to take parental leave and stress leave and paternity leave, these things that we were never able to do before, and pay is getting better. So just opening people's eyes up to that, I think, is important. And like I said, I think you guys are doing a great job. So if there's superintendents out there that are listening that want to do more, I just say reach out to your local school board and ask about career days and get yourself in there. And probably more than not, you'll find it's a great way to recruit people too. But connecting with teachers and guidance counselors is really important, because if you just connect with the students, then you got to connect with the students every single year. If you connect with guidance counselors and teachers, these are the people that push the needle. And anytime I've ever sat down with a high school teacher or a guidance counselor and talked about turf diploma programs at the university or anywhere, they're always like, oh my God, that sounds awesome. And they get work experience, and like they get to work with their hands. It's a combination of hands-on learning and academic theory. It's not all lecture based. I think I've got some students for this. And then they remember that and they continue to perpetuate that message. So once you kind of connect with one school, then you can move over to another one. And that's sort of what we've been trying to do. And I think it's successful, but I think another part of it is to continue to hire high school students. As much of a pain as hiring young people can be, having the patience and understanding the different needs of this younger generation, and that they kind of want the world right away, and learning how to give it to them. Because I think if you kind of suppress it, they move on and they leave. They're not hesitant to just walk out and not tell you they're not coming back. Whereas I think young people today, the more you trust them and the more you give them, the more they step up and really impress you and show them how much they can do. So as painful as that can be, and there's obviously little failures along the way, being able to tolerate that and encourage a safe learning environment can go a long way to converting a lot of people that are currently studying economics or kinesiology or engineering, and they're like, you know what, I think I don't want to do that. I love this. And that's, be interested to talk to a few other programs to find out what proportion of students pursued another educational pathway. They just happened to work at a golf course one summer. They loved it. And then all of a sudden the fire started burning and they became more passionate about it. Maybe they already played golf, and then all of a sudden like a switch goes off, just like it did for me. And it's like, holy, I think I could do this. I've got 3 years experience already, and I've got lots of skills built up. I just need to go to school. So yeah, getting the good word of turf out is hugely important, because we're not in the vernacular of society. Like, you talk about career paths, it's always doctors, lawyers, police, firefighter. There's some careers just appear in popular culture. I think the only time I can think of that a superintendent has actually appeared in popular culture is either Carl Spackler and Caddyshack, or in Me, Myself, and Irene. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, Renee Zellweger poses as a golf course superintendent in that movie. And that might be the only time I think I've ever heard the word golf.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, she's in like the witness protection program or something. She poses as a golf course superintendent. But like, I mean, I challenge anyone to name another movie where that profession is featured. It just like, or if it is in a good, positive light.
Yeah.
So we need to work a little harder to just get out there and be in the conversation, I think, and anything you can do to do that is good.
That is great advice for everyone out there. I think we kind of shot ourselves in the foot for a very long time with a lot of people kind of downplaying the industry, and hopefully that's kind of making a turn for the better here, and you're getting more positive people talking about it.
Yeah, well, I think for a long time our industry served the superintendent, right? And it's no fault of anyone's. It was just that was the majority of people in the association. The associations were focused on superintendent related issues. Superintendents need more money. Superintendents need higher budgets. These are the pressures we're facing. We need to make ourselves look more professional. If you look at some of the bylaws, a lot of them were really focused in on superintendents. They're the only voting members. So there wasn't a lot of material or money or resources left over for these other people that were in line. And I think for a long time it was like this belief of like, well, you gotta earn your dues. And obviously that didn't work out because a lot of people left the industry.
Right.
So no, you don't need to earn your dues. Your industry needs to pay people fairly and needs to give them time off and understanding the sacrifice that they're putting forward. And Adam, you've just had your second child, so congratulations. But not every property is overly accommodating for family people. And if you're a second assistant with two kids, like it's a grind, man. And you better hope that your partner has a pretty flexible job because, school drop-offs don't always work great for golf course superintendents, and summer sports don't always work great for superintendents. But the more we continue to create sustainable jobs that people can stay in long-term in middle management, the better you can build a team so that you can step away from work for a day. The second assistant can step away from work to go to a hockey game to support his family or her family. And I think we're headed in that direction, probably not as fast as I'd like to see, but it's a really, really good time for young people to be getting into this industry. There's a lot of corrections that I think have been made and are continuing to be made to make this a more inclusive, equitable industry that sees more than just, white balding men in khaki pants and blue blazers. The definition of who a superintendent is changing, and that's good. The definition of what a superintendent looks like and how they act and what their expectations are on the property is changing, and that's good. And I think compensation follows with that. So, I always tell that to our students. Like, it's a really, really, it's probably one of the best times to be coming into this industry in like the last 20 years. Back since like the 80s and 90s when there was so much booming, you'd graduate and you'd like get hired to do a grow in, and you'd only worked on a golf course like one season.
Right.
That doesn't happen so much anymore. But it's a pretty great time. But part of the reason for that is because there had to be a lot of people leave to create those opportunities. Mm-hmm. So we can't forget that. How is being a dad to two now, Adam?
Yeah, it's certainly a change. I appreciate the shout out there. It's different for us, but we're making it happen. My little boy, I was telling Brian before, he's been great. He's been helping out with his little sister, and we weren't too sure if he was going to be timid or he was going to be right in there. But I mean, he's been very supportive, and it's a new journey, So it'll be a long journey, but it's a new part of our journey, and I love it. Like, I love her so much, and
and she hasn't cried during this.
No, the dog's barked a few times, but she's up there still sleeping.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I was wondering if you're gonna have to break away or something.
What's next for you, Brian? What's on the docket for the Superintendent Network and all the other things you do?
I think I've got we have 2 trips still this year. I'm going to Phoenix in a couple of weeks, and then meeting Adam and another individual, Jesse, that's going to start helping us out a little bit next year. We're going down to Florida to do a little test run on a new project we're thinking about for next year. So yeah, and then just kind of in the midst of planning for 2025. And, it's like this time of year for me is always the most stressful because it's like, all right, it was a great year. How do we do it again? And so it's just trying to get all the sponsorships put back together, start planning out the year. And so it's chaos around this time of year.
When you're good at what you do, you're kind of your own worst enemy because you continuously raise the bar on yourself, right?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like every superintendent I run across, go out there, and in my eyes, the place looks amazing, and they're like, "Oh, it sucks. We can do this better, we can do that better, blah blah blah." Yeah, it's that competitive nature, I think, in people, right, where you just always want to be improving, and that's good. Complacency kills a lot of great things out there. So, it's just the one thing is just never be happy with where you are and keep trying to push forward. At least that's what I try and do.
I think I got one cool, well, bit of a scary story to finish off, and I'll try to
Oh
keep
boy.
this tight. So in Jasper, it's like 90% of my stories are from Jasper. In the winter, because it's around the lodge is around lakes, and we do have some people come up, and there's some limiting factors of what you can do. So they were like, what else can we set up at the lodge that can keep people entertained during the winter? And so for a long time, the golf course crew would maintain a skating loop on Mildred Lake, which was another lake that sits on the property. So it was a big, long loop. I want to say it was like at least a kilometer around. Like, it was huge. It wasn't like a high school track. Like, this was a massive loop that went around the lake. And on the inside would be some ice hockey rinks, and then sort of like a little public skating area. So our job was to maintain that. And we had kind of a Zamboni that was separated into 3 different machineries. So the first one was a brush or a plow that got all the snow off. The second one that came through was our flooder. And the flooder was a tractor with like a 1,000-gallon tank on the back of it, full of hot water. And if you were the driver, you'd get out of the truck, or the tractor is in neutral, go to the back, and you'd open up this valve, which now allowed the hot water to come out through the pipe and flood the water behind you. And you'd have to run over back to the tractor because the water's coming out now and you're not moving. And you throw the thing into first or second gear and slowly let off the clutch so you can start moving. And if you kind of start spinning out, you had to shut everything down and run back out and close the valve again. Anyways, if you got going, we actually had that thing really nice. It was a beautiful skating loop. It became quite sought after. So the story goes, one day, every now and then, as the snow accumulates throughout the year, we run out of places to put it, and so we have to go out on the ice with Bobcat to move the piles so that we can have a place to put more snow. And we're very careful. We go with a chainsaw that has a depth gauge on it, and we cut into the ice to make sure there's the appropriate depth. And we have a little sheet that would tell you if you've got this depth of ice, it will hold this weight. So we're always very, very careful when we go out with big machines, particularly the 1,000-gallon water tank Zamboni flooder, and then of course a Bobcat. So anyways, one day, one of our guys working on the crew goes down to the Bobcat, goes to start moving some snow. I can't remember. I think I'm like up at the shop having coffee, kind of cleaning up things, maybe getting ready for an event. And I got a radio. It's like, Cam, can you come down to the powerhouse, which is the area right next to where the rink was, and where you fill up with water. And I said, great, I'll come down. So I hop in the truck, I drive down, I get down there, and I'm looking around. I'm like, yeah, where's this guy? And I look over, and all I can see is, now it's about minus 25, minus 30 out. So don't forget about that part.
That's cold.
I look over,
by the way,
and it's Celsius for the listeners. Yeah, very, very cold.
I don't know what the conversion
like
is.
Frostbite in like
cold. It's cold.
Frostbite on exposed skin in 5 minutes, basically, is that kind of cold. So I look over, and I can see just the back corner of the Bobcat fully submerged in water.
Geez.
You can see. I'll see if I can find the photo, and I'll send it for you to put up on your Instagram page. And I'm like, holy F. And I'm thinking, like, he's still in there. That's like that. I'm like, I'm freaking out. And I get out of the machine, I run over, and I'm like trying to figure out how I can even remotely try to make the situation better. And then all of a sudden I hear from behind me, hey, Cam. And I turn around and look, and there is our guy, and he is frozen solid. Like because he went in the water and he got out,
man.
and in that short period of time, like he froze solid. Like his clothes were brittle. And I'm like, oh my God. And I run over, I'm like, you're okay. I thought you were still in there. And he was like, no, so what had happened was, it was obvious we'd had maybe a warm spell and the snow had melted. It was quite heavy and compact. And so the weight of the Bobcat was fine, but when he took the big snow bucket, and if you've ever been in a snow or a bobcat, they have a much bigger bucket for moving snow, so it can hold a huge quantity. Well, that when he pulled that bucket fully loaded up, it added obviously a tremendous amount of weight, and it could be that section of the ice just didn't quite have the same depth because of that sort of underground swell that I talked about earlier, and that bobcat went under. And in a split second, he not only was able to turn the engine off, which kind of helped save the bobcat a little bit, but he also managed, there's like a little escape hatch behind you. If you've ever been in a bobcat, you'll notice the back window has a little pull cord, and you can pull on that and you can escape through the back. That's how he got out. And it took, we had to bring in 2 dump trucks with like these pretty heavy chains. We had to break through the ice because the bobcat froze in there, and we had to the power of the dump trucks pulling was actually what got that bobcat out, and the thing was frozen solid, so it got dragged all the way back. I got put up on a hydraulic lift and thawed for like 3 days before they could check and make sure it was fine. And they drained a little bit of water out of it, but it was it was good. Nobody passed away, which was great. So like I said, it'll have to go way back in my archives to find the photo of that bobcat. This is a 100% true story. And
so you're saying if you want to have a good time, good experiences, go to Jasper, huh? Sounds like there's a lot of crazy stuff happening out there.
I think there's crazy stuff that happens everywhere. Jasper, there's just a whole bunch of stuff about that place. Obviously the wildlife, the scenery, highly transient staff. A lot of people come in there, are there to party for the summer. So there's a lot of turnover, but they're there for a good time. And generally the vibe's pretty good. Not everyone wants to go and live in Jasper. So the types of people that are drawn there, a pretty good outlook on life. And we were there at a very special time too. Like that 5 years there was a lot of really great people. And, our golf course won, it was a #1 resort property in the world for like 16 years running. And we kept that going. We had little battles with Banff. So, people could play both properties and they had to vote which one they liked better. And then it was sort of like this internal battle we had of like, which was the better property, just for fun. Right. It was a great spot. I would highly recommend going out and work. And it's not just, Jasper, Fairmont, the company Fairmont, I always enjoyed working for. But anywhere in the mountains, you can't lose. There's just people that want to have a good time and work on a golf course and enjoy life. And that's a pretty good recipe for having a good time. So
Jasper and Banff have been on my list. I'm going to go see some of that Stanley Thompson golf up there. It looks phenomenal.
Well, Jasper doesn't look the same. I'm hoping to get out there next summer. My wife and I try to go when we can, and it was just heartbreaking to hear that forest fire, and they've done a pretty good job to get that place back up. And there's been a lot of fundraising dollars to support the families that were devastated. And I mean, the course, I don't have the total 411 on it, but the course, the grass kind of came out okay. A lot of trees were lost. I'm sure some infrastructure here and there too. So it's not going to look the way that I remember it for probably a long time, but it's just another badge to put on a very historic property, and it'll get back there one day. So yeah. Anyhow, gentlemen, I just really flattered that the invitation came. You've had a pretty star-studded group of guests on here. I kind of look at it and I'm like, why am I on here? So
this was awesome,
really do
Cam.
appreciate it.
This was awesome. We appreciate you coming on. Great stories. Great to meet you here virtually, and can't wait to shake your hand in San Diego.
Yeah, that'll be great. I look forward to that. I gotta book my room too. So, been dreading that, but
everybody's putting it off.
I'll be there for sure.
Just booked mine yesterday, so now I got to book everything else. And just side note, if there's anything we can do for you, your students, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out if there's suggestions on internships or, any people that we can connect to you that you can't currently do with your network of peers.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I look at that as one of the top responsibilities of my job, is to just connect students with the industry in as many ways as possible. So I will take that seriously, and certainly pass on your contact information to those students that are wanting to reach out. So
please do.
Thanks very much. Keep doing what you guys are doing. It's awesome. I don't know how you find the time to do this.
Can't thank you enough for doing this, man. And there's a big reason why we bring you on. Like you do a lot for the students, you do a lot for this industry, and the people like you in your position. It's it's why the industry keeps moving. And we also want to highlight not just the superintendent position. There's a lot of people that get into this industry and maybe realize that that's not what they want to do, or they need a different schedule in their life, or they need to be living somewhere different. So there's a lot of different roles in this industry where you can make a difference, and you're a leader at what you do. And, we've learned a lot today, and I think there's a lot of people that'll take a lot from this. So, you can hang your hat on a lot of different things, but, helping those kids out, helping that program out is really big. So we appreciate what you do. And, like Brian said, if there's anything we can do to help.
If the opportunity ever comes up, I think a really cool podcast would be to bring in like a collection of students, and just it would be great to highlight some students from the University of Guelph, some from Olds, some from Penn State, Michigan, Rutgers, Purdue, Texas A&M. When I listen to podcasts, I always love hearing from the students. Like everyone can relate to them. They've got good stories. It's all potential.
Right.
And if that ever, I know I'm not going to tell you guys your business, but if there ever comes an opportunity where you'd like to do that, I'd be happy to liaison with a few students to come in and share their life story. So
awesome.
Well, we'll stay in touch about the show, because I think we're going to be doing some stuff on site, and we'd love to get some students involved. So we'll definitely.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Yeah,
it's been a real treat.
Yeah. Hey, before I let you go, did you have Jason Jackson?
Yes.
Did you? Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
Jason.
I spent some time with him a couple of weeks ago when I was in Bermuda. So he's hosting the championship Butterfield this week on PGA Tour. So
that's right. Yeah. Jason was awesome. Now, I was not running the program when he came through. I was like a connected alumni. I was a guest speaker in some classes when I was still an assistant, but I remember Jason well. We connected. He comes back to speak to Turf Club here usually every year, every second year. So, great guy.
Yeah, he's an impressive kid, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to drop that. So
when you see him, tell him I said hi.
Yeah, will do. I'll text them. Been sending them some videos. I'm putting some videos out this week about their team. So I'll let them know we chatted today. Cam, thanks so much, man.
Sign off.
Yeah. Take care, brother.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for stopping by and sticking with us through that one. Awesome episode. Great interview with our boy Cam Shaw. Can't wait to see him at the hockey tournament coming up, and then down at the show with everybody from the Guelph Turfgrass program. Oh yeah, that's gonna be a good one. I'm an alumni. Certainly don't do enough, but something, right? Thank you to Toro, Andersons, Apex 10. Keep those reels sharp. Next week.